Hey everyone, I'm Janimator0 from Horizon Worlds, and I'm going to be showing you how to make liquids inside of cups. So to start off, we're just going to make a very simple beginner cup. With this cup, I'll show you how to make the cup that I have here. And when you pour it out, you can see the liquid kind of disappears. And when you try to fill it up, it pops right back into place. So the intermediate cup is very similar to the beginner's cup. In this one, when you put it under, you see it slowly fills it up as opposed to just popping into place. And when you empty it out, we'll do the same thing. It'll slowly empty out. And if you put it in a different color, it will change colors based on the color that you have it under. In the advanced cup area, we're going to take a cup and we're going to do something very similar, except for this time, instead of popping the color in, we're going to slowly transition to the color of the liquid. And for the last one, I just call this one the Janimator0 cup. And this is the cup I've shown before. I've posted videos on this one. And this one has a little bit of extra physics involved. So it does everything the other cups do. But with this one, you could see that there's a little bit of a kind of twirl effect happening. So if you swirl the cup, you could see that it kind of bobbles back and forth and it slowly settles over time. Also, if you lean it in a direction, you'll see that the liquid will lean. So I'll be talking about the secret on how to do that. I won't be going too deep into how to code everything just because it will take me a long time, but I'll get you the idea just so you know how it was made. And you'll be probably able to do it yourself with some, advanced math. You should be able to get this going. So to start off, I'm going to make the cup. We will get the text gizmo. And what we're going to want to do is make a transparent square for that text gizmo. So to do that, what we could do is type in mark equals, which is essentially like highlighting text. And we're going to give it FF, which equals white in hex code. And we're going to give it something like 4, which is like the amount of transparency. We'll see if that works. If it doesn't work, we could raise it a little bit more. And what do we want to highlight? We just want to highlight a tab space. And you can see that little square kind of pops up with the X through it. That equals a tab. If I hit enter, hopefully we got it. So this is that transparent square will be used to make the cup. What you could do is just stretch that up to the approximate height that you want the cup to be. And I do like to align things all the time. So let's just actually go into the rotation and align it with the world space. So it's perfectly aligned. And we'll go into our icon, hit the duplicate tool, hit down so we have snapping enabled, and we'll grab the edge of that text and kind of rotate it to the point where it hits that angle that we need. I believe that's about it. And then on the left hand, you see that array button. I'll keep hitting the array button. You have that circle, the transparent cup circle. We probably want to add something on the bottom there. So let's go ahead and grab one of these text objects again, duplicate it, snap it to the bottom. And we also want to stretch it accordingly. All right, there you go. So we have one part, but we still want to kind of make sure these other two holes are filled in. So let's go in, grab that one we just made, just snap into place. And let's do that one more time. You'll probably end up also wanting to have a little handle, and you can make whatever handle you want. For this one, I'll just do one of these half hollow cylinders, and you can just snap it into place. There you have it. Now, we don't just need a cup, we're also going to need the liquid that goes inside of it. So let's go ahead and make the liquid. We're going to squeeze a cylinder for the liquid and kind of have it upright. And we can even just start coloring right now just so it's looking like a liquid. So that's a nice little color that we can choose. But what I do like to do is always scale it with the world. And with the liquid, I will scale it to a scale of 1. So right now we have it at 1.5, 1.5, 1.5. We do want it to be at a scale of 1. And that will help with the math later on. So I know that we zeroed out the rotation, but that's not the angle we want it at. We do want it to be rotated so it's facing upright. So while the height needs to be 0, 0, 0, that's important. We don't really need the width to be the same scale as the 1. So we could have those to be a little smaller. So we'll change that to let's just do 0.8. So it makes it a little taller, and change the Y as well to 0.8. The one thing that's important as well is we also going to want to scale it so it scales from the bottom over here. So what we're going to want to do is group two objects together and make that bottom object invisible, and select both of them and group them. But if you look at it and you look at the attributes, the scale is all set to 1, which is exactly what we want. What I typically want to do is always ensure the y-axis is pointing up. So you know this is the y-axis by kind of looking at the arrows, and you can see on that arrow it says minus y over there, and on this arrow it says plus x, and this one says z. We don't want that. We want the top to be y, which is typically good. So let's just fix that up really quick by ungrouping it. And to do that, we're going to have another shape to kind of influence that rotation. So let's grab this shape, and you can see this shape has the correct y, but also it probably has the wrong rotation. We want to zero out that rotation. So we want the rotation on that cube to be 0, 0, 0. So first select that one, then select the other two. So you can see they're all ready to be grouped together, but we don't really need that cube anymore. So just deselect that cube by hovering over it while holding your trigger, and then group them together. So now you could see this is the correct orientation. And if we go into the attributes and we change the scale of the y to something small, you'll see it'll scale from the bottom over here, right? As if the liquid just shrunk down, which is kind of what you're seeing when we fill up the liquid over there. All right, so now that we have the liquid that we're going to be using, and we have the cup, we do want everything to kind of work with the liquid because the liquid is scaled perfectly. We have that 1, 1, 1, and we know that the height of this in world scale is actually 1, so that's going to be useful. And let's just grab this cup, select the whole cup itself, and let's just shrink it down. We don't have to have snapping on for this, so let's just turn that off. Let's shrink it down, and let's kind of get the cup working around this. You do want to make sure the cup, though, I will turn on snapping in to make sure that it's oriented correctly, because you don't want it to be rotate a little bit off. You want it to be kind of perfect. There's your cup, and you can see we kind of have to grow it out a little bit down here and maybe grow it up a little bit there. So the scaling of the actual cup is not too important, but the liquid inside should be correct. So we did scale the cup a little bit off of what it was before, but it works great. The one thing, though, is the liquid. We don't want to grab the liquid because that's a little weird. So we're going to turn off collidability on that liquid. So when we turn that object to grabbable, you're not going to be able to just grab it. And the last thing we're going to do is you may want to grab the cup by the cup itself, right? So let's grab just a cylinder, and we're going to make this cylinder invisible in just a minute, but we're going to drag it to the bottom. We're going to have that cylinder selected so that we could scale it individually and kind of scale it to the edges of the cup. We're going to want something like this. Let's just go to the properties of that cylinder, and I do like when numbers just fit perfectly. So let's just change that to a 1 and change that to a 1. So that, it's a perfect circle going around. We can see it's not quite centered. So if I select it, turn off my snapping, I can kind of, just centered by eye. You don't need to center it exactly, but you do want to make it collidable but invisible. There you go. Let's group it all together. Now, again, when I group it all together, I could see it's kind of the angle that it's grouping at is a little bit off. So let's use that same technique we did before to make sure the grouping is nice and straight, because we want to make sure everything just kind of lines up. And yeah, it looks like I can grab the handle now, and I can grab the cup now. So we scaled down the cup, and now I can grab the cup, and it looks more like a cup. It's not some giant cup that if you try to drink, you'd probably drown. So I'm grabbing a script, and I'm going to attach it to the cup. And we're going to now try to get the liquid to go away. But first we need a reference to the liquid, right? Because we can't tell the liquid to disappear, because how do we even know where the liquid is? Which object is the liquid? So let's go into the group. And a good way to do that is just to hit button over there. And you can see the arrow flips, which means if you click it again, you'll go out of the group. And I'll have that liquid selected. So I know this is the invisible part of the liquid. So I know when I highlight over that, that is the liquid. And if I bring it up, it says group. And I can even just name it liquid. And to go out of the group, I can click that button again. Or you could just double click anywhere outside of the group, and you're brought back out of the group. And you can see the arrow changes automatically. Go into that script. That we're going to need the reference to an object, right? Which is the liquid that we were just talking about. And we're going to get that object. We're going to get a liquid, and it's an object that we want. And we're going to click OK. There's the liquid. So now if we go back to the cup, we'll see that liquid is named over here, and it's empty because we didn't drag anything in. And this is the liquid that we had, that we popped out for the dialogue. And we grab that little button over there. We drag it over, and now we have a connection to our liquid. So we could do a quick test just to make sure it works. Let's go into our actions, and grab set object visibility. If we leave it in self, it will turn the whole cup invisible, which you don't want. We just want the liquid. So we're going to set the liquid over there. Set liquid to visibility of false, right? So as soon as the world starts, as soon as I hit that play button, that cup should just not have liquid anymore. And it doesn't. That's perfect. I'm going to hit stop and the liquid should come right back. Great. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a loop. And this loop will run every frame. And it's a common design pattern for coding. So let's create a new event. When event is received, and I'll call that event update. And now we need to call that event, right? Because there's nothing telling the code to go into that little area where it says update. So we're going to send event to object, and the object we want to send to itself, and we want to call that update. So now we have send update to self. That means when world is started, all of a sudden whatever is under here will get called because it's in world start. But we want it to call itself too, because now we want it, when world starts, it'll call the update. And then at the end of that, it'll send update to itself again. So it'll come back around and it'll do the same thing over and over and over again, every frame. And with that, what we could do is we could put an if statement. And we want, if something happens, set the liquid's visibility to false. So what is that something? It's going to be the dot product. So I know this is not so much of a beginner thing, but it's not too difficult. So I will find dot product, and it's under vector math, and it's dot product. It's right there. And I'm missing something. We want if the dot product of two vectors is greater than a number. So let's just go greater than. And let's just drag that in there. So sometimes that's how I do things. I duplicate the code and then delete the old code because it already has all the stuff I need in there sometimes. So now we have if dot product is greater than a small number. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a number, and I'll explain how that all works in a second. So we'll put in 0.4. And in the dot product, what we're going to do is add an upward direction of self. So that would be in here. Upward direction of self we want. So we have self over here. We'll just drag that over. And we want it to be with a vector that points down. So that would be 0, -1, 0. And what that will do is the way that dot products work is they'll take two vectors, and this is what a vector is. It'll take two vectors, so the upward direction of the self, and if you hover over it, you see the upward direction of the self is that y, right? And it's pointing up. And it'll compare the two vectors. If the two vectors are exactly the same, they're both pointing exactly up, it'll return a value of 1, right? So this will all equal the number 1. But if they're exactly opposite to each other, which they are currently, right, because the cup is pointing up, it'll return a value of -1. And if they're perpendicular, so if, let's say, the upward direction of self is this, and the other vector we plug in here is to the left, like that, it will return a value of 0. And it'll get everything in between as well. Right, so this would be 1, 0, -1, and if it's something like here, it would probably be 0.5. So as we turn the cup, right now they're equaling about -0.5, and here it would reach 0, it would return 0. But when you go past this point around there, it'll be 0.5 because they're almost equal to each other, and the more equal they are to each other, the closer you get to the number 1. So that's great. That means when they're very close, when the cup is almost upside down, do whatever's in here, and it says turn off the liquid, and it should all work. I know that was a little bit of a mouthful, but let's hope it all works. There it is. It just disappears. But unfortunately, it doesn't come back. And for that, we're going to need a trigger. Since it's much easier to just go through existing code, and we kind of got the idea of how it all works, let's just kind of see what we did here. So we added a trigger, which is right here, and we made it really long, and we added a script to the trigger, right? Beginner liquid script. And we have another object. And currently this object isn't referenced. It's just an object so we could see where the liquid is, because in play mode, you can't see the triggers. And if you go into beginner liquid, you could see that it's attached to a trigger. So we can call the when trigger is entered by object. And when trigger is entered by object, we want to send fill cup to that object. So whatever object goes into that trigger, we want to send that fill cup command. And we know that this is the cup that's going to go through it. So we're going to go into beginner cup, and we're going to have that fill cup is received, right? So when the cup goes into the trigger, this will get called by that script. When we go into the trigger, we want to make sure the trigger is going to have a tag for cup. So anything that has this tag, the trigger will get triggered when it goes through it. So we set that word cup over there, and we're going to need that word somewhere else. So we're going to need that on the cup itself. So if we go into the cups group, there it is. And you can see if we go to attributes and go to the bottom, we got cup tag set up. So we know it's all good to go. When we drag this cup, as long as there's some sort of collision object in there, which it does have because we know we can grab it, and we put it into the trigger, everything should get work. And this line of code should kind of hit. And that line of code says set liquid visibility to true. And if we go and we try testing that out, it will do that same thing. So when we turn upside down, everything disappears. But when it goes through the trigger, right, everything comes back. So it's not going to be perfect where you have to put the cup where the liquid is through the liquid, but it still works, right? And if you did want to, you could make a special collider, but we're not going to get into that, where it's just on the top. So only if the top hits, then it fills up. So let's move on now to the intermediate. So this one, it doesn't just pop into place, it slowly grows into place, right? And then when you turn upside down, it shrinks into place. And on top of that, it changes colors. So the first thing I'm opening up right now is the script that's on the trigger, right? And it's very similar to what was there before, but now we added a second thing. We added a when trigger is exited by the object, we send a stop fill. When the trigger is entered, not only do we send the fill cup to object command, but we also pass in a parameter, and that parameter is color of visible liquid. And what is color of visible liquid? Visible liquid is that cylinder we were talking about before. It's this one right here. And if you go into your tool sets, you could see and find the color of command. And what that will do is it will return the color of an object that you specified. So we do have a reference to that cylinder right here. So we made this variable. That's an object variable. And then when we went to the trigger, we attached the cylinder, as you could see, to there. And now that visible liquid is the cylinder. And we say send fill cup to the object, but send it the color of that cylinder. And we could just change that cylinder right now if we really wanted to. Let's change it to a green. And now we drag it over and you can see it turned green, right? So it did send something to the object to make it turn green. So now let's look into the script of the cup itself. And it's very similar, right? It has that update loop that we were talking about before from the last script. So this runs over and over, and you can see that if you go to the bottom, it sends update to itself. But there's a whole bunch of more code in there. But we're not interested in that just yet. We want to go look at the fill cup, which we had before. But this time, you could see we added in this liquid color variable. We added this by ourselves by just clicking the new parameter, typing in liquid cup, setting it to color. And then we ended up with this liquid color because, if it's sending a color and we're not expecting a color, we're not going to get the event, and that's not good. And what we're doing here is we have a bool, and we turn that to true. And what that bool is saying is, it's telling us, is the cup filling? Yes, it is, right? When I'm in there, I'm filling the cup. So let's set that to true. But what we're also doing is we're setting that color to the liquid itself. So that's the liquid inside of the mug. And what that will do is just switch the liquid to the color of that right there. So this liquid will become that liquid. And now we have the stop fill. And all the stop fill is doing is really saying, we're not filling anymore. All right. So in the update, we have that same dot product we had before, right? So when it's upside down, but now we're doing something different, right? We're changing this fill amount, and we're going to start adding and removing numbers from that fill amount. And what that fill amount is doing, it's going to tell us how much it's filled, right? 0 means it's not filled at all, and 1 will mean that it's completely filled. We're going to start adding small numbers to that fill amount. This one's when we're dumping it out. So here we're removing numbers every time it's upside down. So you can see it's setting the fill. If the fill amount is 1, it's going to set it to the fill amount, which is 1 minus 0.01. So, and every time this loop happens, it'll slowly go down and down until the fill amount becomes 0. If we are filling and it's inside that trigger, we're going to do the exact opposite. We're going to raise that fill amount. This is kind of an important part, and you can take this out, but what this will do is it'll limit it, right? Because if we keep adding numbers to here, eventually this will go past 1. This will go to 2, 3, and the liquid itself will actually keep going up. And maybe we can even play with that and see that happen. But right now we're clamping it. So that's what the clamp does. You pass in a number, and it'll say only return a number between these two numbers. And the reason I didn't put 0 there is because you never want anything to scale to 0 because it might break. When you scale things to anything 0 or below, there's a good chance that something can go wrong and break. So it's a good habit to never get to 0, but I got a number that's really small and close to 0. So now that I have that fill amount, now all we do is we scale the liquid, right? We're scaling the liquid, and we set up the liquid correctly. We have that little invisible object under the liquid. So we know it's going to scale from the bottom of the liquid. And we want to scale the left and right and the forward and back to a number of 1, which we know is it's just the way it is right now. So it's not going to scale at all when we set up the liquid, but the fill amount will change constantly. And remember, it'll either go up a lot or it'll keep going down, and it'll continuously scale it every frame. And that's pretty much it. So let's go ahead and give that a try. So here's our cup, and that's what's happening right there. So right now that fill amount is growing, and when I go to different objects, it changes color. And when I dump it out, the fill amount shrinks, right? And that's all it is. The scaling of that object is going like that and like that. So let's do something fun. Let's actually go in there. We have that clamp. Let's just raise that clamp to something ridiculous like 99. We're never going to want this. Grab that cup and let's add the blue in there. And it's cool. It's going, oh no, it's still going up. And it'll just keep going until it hits that max. Now we're on to the advanced one, right? And the advanced one is almost exactly the same as the intermediate one, except for the color doesn't change instantly. It kind of slowly changes as you put the cup in. There you go, right? And as I put it in a new color, it should slowly turn into that color. And I could just hold it. Even while it's filled, it'll still change into the color that you want. You know, when you put the cup in there, the trigger happens. It sends the color back to the cup. But now we're storing in this fill color thing, right? So that we're taking this liquid color. These two are the same variable. If I drag it in here, even though it's blue, it's the same one. And it's sending it to the fill color where it's getting stored. So now we know that we have the last color we touched. That's what we know. We know the last color we touched because of this. So even if I take the cup out, we still have a reference to that color. That color is going to be with us and we can reuse it whenever we want. It says if fill amount is less than 0.1. And we know that it can be 0.1 because I think we set the fill amount to clamp between 0.005, and that's less than 0.1. So this can happen, right? When it's really empty. So when it's really empty, what I'm telling you right now is to set the current color to that fill color. And if we scroll down, we could say we're setting the liquid color to that current color. And the reason we do that is because when the cup is empty, we don't want it to have that green in there anymore. You know, it's a fresh new cup. As soon as you put it into the orange, you want it to be just pure orange. But if the cup is not empty, then we go through this part of the code, right? And this part of the code is the part that blends the colors together. And what happens is we figure out, we have an R, a G, and a B value here. And I only did it this way because it's easier to read. So the R symbolizes red, the G is green, and the B is blue. And we're individually assigning them colors based on some sort of formula. And then in the end, we're assigning those colors directly to the current color, and we're doing the exact same thing. We're setting the liquid to that current color. All right, so let's kind of visit into what's happening right here with the blending of the colors. Now, really what's happening is I'm lerping. You can see I'm just calling lerp a whole bunch of times. And if I kind of scroll to the end, you can see it's just a lerp. And I can even just drag in a lerp just so you can see what it looks like. It'll take two numbers and it'll take an alpha. And the alpha is just going to be a number from 0 to 1 and any number in between. So you could put any numbers in there. So as an example, let's put the number 0 and let's put the number 100, right? Now the alpha does all the magic work. And as I said, the alpha needs to be from 0 to 1. So when the alpha is 0, it's going to be, it'll take the number from the first slot that you have. But when the number is 1, it will take over the number from the last slot that you assigned to, and it'll transfer the result back. So right now, it'll transfer 100 over to whatever variable we want. You know, if it's R, it'll set R to 100. But if you do something like 0.5, it will find the middle point between 0 and 100, which is 50. And it'll work that way for any number. So if I have 1 here and 2 here, since it's still 0.5, the number in between those will be 1.5, and it'll grab that. Now, the downside is I can't use lerp for colors. If you try to plug in the colors into here, it'll just tell you, no, it's incorrect type. You can't do that. I'll only take in numbers and I think vectors as well. But that's what we wanted. So we have to kind of emulate that. We have to kind of do the same thing, but find a way around that. So what I did do is there's this get component of color. And what it does is it extracts out a single component from a color. And we're getting the color from the fill color, which is, remember, is the color that got passed down from the liquid. And then we're just trying to, we want to move it up from the current color to whatever the color we want it to be, but we only move it up by a small little bit. Now we're doing the same for the G value, which is green, and the blue value. And in the end, we're just reassigning the current color to the new color, which is R, G, and B all together as a new color. And that's what we do. So now the big one, how do we get this cup to work? Now there is a lot of math that's involved in this cup right here. So I'm not going to go into every little thing, but I will explain how it all works. And then we can kind of peek into the code and see how the code works. But there is something fancy going on here because we don't have any shape that looks like that. All right, so how do I get that shape to work? So this is how we're going to start. We're going to take a cylinder. And we're going to flatten it down. Let's make it a little bit bigger just so we can see it a lot better. And that sort of can be the liquid, right? And let's take another cylinder, right, and put it underneath. And that sort of can be the liquid. And I could potentially rotate this around like that. And that could kind of behave like the liquid. But then how would we be able to take this other cylinder and fill it up so that, it doesn't go through the other one? Like, how would we do that? How would that work? So here's a cylinder that's rotated. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the cylinder and kind of make sure it's 45 degrees. And now I just kind of want to group it to itself. All right, so I took the cylinder, I grouped it to itself, and then what I want to do is I need to be kind of skewed a little bit, right? So I'll go outside this group, and I'll shrink it a little bit, kind of like that, right? And then I think I'll rotate it upwards, and that kind of, we have a weird skew, and I do want this line to be straight up with the world, and I'm going to kind of fake it here, right? But it doesn't look like, the cup has a liquid that's kind of more round. If you look at it from the top, it's very more oval than in a circle. So let's do that one more time. Let's group it one more time with another cube. And now I have this shape, but I could take that shape and make it more of a circle if I look at it from the top, right? And if I want it to be perfect, what I might do is I might actually just grab one of these and kind of compare it to make sure that the bottom, the radius around it is a perfect circle. But this is the secret right here. And what I'm doing is shrinking and growing this, and you could see how it gets flatter and more steep as I'm shrinking and growing. But essentially, it's scaling from the center, right? It's not scaling from the top or bottom when you change the scale. And then let's make that really long. And then what I do is I just add another sphere, grow it up, and I hide that other part so that it just looks like a cup of water. When you want less liquid or more liquid, you can grow it up and down like we did before. And when you want to change the angle, you squash and stretch it. I can't do it here because I have to squash and stretch it from both sides. The other secret is when it's tilted on a different angle, all I have to do is just rotate this. And that's sort of what's happening when it's waving back and forth. So with that, I'm just going to show you a quick, simple example that gets you the idea of how it all works. And then we'll just deep dive into the code itself. But you should get a better idea of how the code works. All right, so let's just make a new script. And what we're going to do is we're going to kind of get this effect where a ball is following another ball. We could actually use that new code block that just came out called spring push. And what that does is it puts a spring on the ball so that it moves towards the first ball. And if we look at the code, we have the small ball referenced on this bigger ball. So the big ball is the one that has the script. You can see there it is. That's the spring. So, when I did my cup, I didn't have this awesome spring available. Had to code it all myself. So thank you, Horizon, for creating this. But if I put them next to each other, all that's really happening is I have a spring, and I'm doing some fancy math so that the placement of where the ball is will only be on a flat surface. So right now you can see the ball goes up and down. But I did add some code to my custom code to make sure that that ball is only on a flat surface from where this ball is right here. Really use something very similar to look at for the liquid. So all that's happening is that this swirl, and remember it's two shapes, the top shape is kind of always looking at that second ball. And when I'm swirling it around, I'm just doing this. And the liquid is just looking at it. That's all that's really happening, right? With just fancier code, because I didn't have the spring blocks at the time. Thank you, Horizon, once again. And let's kind of look at the code now really quick. All right, so we have the tilt vector, which is kind of the position of the fluid surface. So the fluid surface is, the fluid was on top. So there's two objects, one on the bottom, one on the top. And the look at vector, that's kind of what I was mentioning before, where it's looking at. And we have the fluid root, and fluid root's what I call the bottom half of that cup, and that's what hides that weird warping that's happening with the other sphere. That's one that's on top. What I do a bunch of stuff like setting visibilities to false. And here I do a whole bunch of local scripting, which I don't want to get into. I'm transferring the ownership of a whole bunch of things to myself so that, when I'm swirling everything around, it all happens in real time. And here there's a lot similar to what we did before. And we're assigning current colors. And we have the fluid loop visibility. We're doing a whole bunch of other stuff right here in terms of setting color. And here's the update. I'm doing things with velocity, and that has to do with the spring. And we're kind of swirling everything around and how it all kind of moves together. And here's the fluid surface look towards, and it's looking towards a point, which would be that small ball in the example I was doing. But remember, that small ball will always be flat with the cup. So it'll never be higher or lower. So the fluid wouldn't rotate in a weird direction. And that's pretty much it. So that's everything that's in there. So it is a lot to take in. I didn't go through everything here, but I think with everything I explained, you get a good idea of how it all works and how it all comes together. And, and to create these awesome liquids that you could drink and pour out and just enjoy. I just want to tell you guys that I have a school called the Creators Academy. Currently, as of today, it runs every Thursday from 8 p.m. Eastern Time to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. We do both beginner and advanced. All you got to do is go to the Creators Academy world, and all the details should be in there. So thanks for watching this video. I'm Janimator0, and this is how I made my cool cups. I hope you enjoyed my video, and cheers.